All right. Hi, Tanya. Really, really a delight to be with you. I'm grateful for your time and your voice for this project, Sea Change Within Us. Um, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself and take as much time as you'd like? We'd like to know who you are.
My name is Tanya Pelach. I am a citizen of Quinault Nation, located on the west coast of Washington State, as well as a Yurok descendant from the tip of Northern California. Both of my lineage and my ancestors are of the coastal people, and I'm fortunate to kind of live near my reservation still, and I get to practice my the care I have for the environment and stuff, that's being the Natural Resources Program Manager for the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians. And I currently live by the beach with my two dogs and my lovely husband.
Nice. Yeah. And what part of Washington by the beach? You said near the
Uh,
Quinault tribe. Can you let people know
yeah,
exactly where that is?
yeah. So I live 2 miles south of the most southern border of the Quinault Reservation. So I live in Pacific Beach, and I'm fortunate enough that I live close enough that I can open up my windows and hear the ocean. And sometimes it is very quiet on the very calm days, and other days, like last night and today, where we just had a giant storm, has been definitely roaring outside. So we're very fortunate to live this close.
Yeah, the music of the ocean. That is really fortunate. I can relate to that. I grew up on a hillside in Seattle, and it was such a blessing to live next to the water. And actually, just to share with you a little bit, it's that hillside where my family home was, is gone because of water and excessive water in the 90s. And I believe it's what part of what led me into this work and really understanding the hubris of white men that came and built things on hillsides. And in my research a number of years ago, I learned that I'm assuming it's the Duwamish tribes, the Lushootseed language. I'm still getting better at knowledge in this area. They actually had a word that translated somewhere around water coming out of hillsides. So it was not a place to build houses. Um, we need to respect the land. And part of how I found you was understanding the impact of sea level rise. I think a lot of people think that, oh, that's not happening near me. But when I started this project, I learned that Washington state is impacted by everything related to climate, and in this case, water. So sea level rise. And you mentioned you are part of the Quinault tribe, and the Quinault tribe is impacted deeply by sea level rise. And in the process of, would you like to, actually, I'm not even going to finish that sentence. Would you like to speak to that first? I'm wondering and curious if that might have something to do, your childhood, as mine did, with the work that you do.
Yeah, so I would just start off by saying that there's a really special spot on the Quinault Reservation that kind of splits the um, impacts of sea level rise as far as erosion and accretion goes. So there is Point Grenville on our reservation that literally marks the line with geological surveys that they've done. So from that point on the reservation north, erosion is occurring. And from there south, it's actually proven that the beaches to the south of the reservation are actually growing. They're kind of not necessarily every single one of them, because there is one at Shoalwater Wash Away Beach, of course. But it's just kind of that more general divide. Um, and unfortunately, our village of Tahlequah and the village of Cleats on the reservation occurred to the north of that point and are seeing substantial impacts from sea level rise. Uh, I know that you just asked about, if there's any driving factors behind sea level rise and what led me to the work that I did. And I think one of the main ones that I can think of is the fact that my family home in the village of Tahlequah, where my now younger brother and my grandma still live at, is, they're facing the impacts of what happens if the ocean comes in further, and they continue to see flooding to our family home. It's about 2 years prior, I believe, or might be three now, because of I I feel like the timeline got a little blurry after COVID, but we saw a flooding within the home that got us at our garage for the first time, kind of deteriorated the bottom of the drywall. We started to cause some old issues there, and that's not something that we ever grew up with. I lived in that family home since elementary school, and it's just kind of sad as time progresses, that we just had flooding in the village there like 2 days ago. Unfortunately, it wasn't high enough to get into our home, but the street that is one street closer to the ocean, they had to evacuate all those homes, and those folks typically go stay at our tribal casino because the tribe knows that it's such a safety issue that they cover the cost to house them when there's a risk of harms to our residents there. And one of the residents lost their set of their back porch because they got washed away. They made a funny haha post about it on Facebook because they were like, if anybody sees our back porch, let us know. And of course they were joking, but they did find it. But it's just it's sad to me because like I believe that our family home won't be able to be occupied there by the time that I'm like a grandma or great grandma. I just know that the tribe is moving towards relocating all those residents up and out of harm's way. And it's just a matter of not if, but when that house will not be able to be occupied by any of our family and our future generations of relatives. It makes me nervous. My mom, unfortunately, still wants to put a lot of money into that house just because she does believe that it will be there for generations to come. However, with the impact of sea level rise and the frequent occurrence that we're now seeing with flooding in the area, that's just not going to be the case. Um, it's kind of a topic we tend to avoid. My younger brother and I have both, he's doing his undergraduate work at the Central Washington University, and he's also doing environmental science like I did in my undergrad. And climate change is something that we believe in, through and through. And it's just kind of unfortunate because we keep trying to relay to my mom that ocean is the level is raising and that flooding is going to keep occurring. So it's not worth putting money into the home that we could generally use to live somewhere else, and make sure that we're putting money forward in a way that we will have, a little bit of generational wealth going forward. And it's not that my mom doesn't believe in climate change. It's just that she thinks that this is something that's like 300 years out from not just, less than that. So, yeah.
I can relate. Yeah, I can relate. I remember standing on the edge of our property with my dad when I was a kid. This must have been late 80s, early 90s, and we always had erosion,
Hmm.
and he would always be fixing the sewage line, and it scared me. It's almost as if I could feel, when I look back into my childhood, I could feel into my body that things were unstable. And he would say, "Oh, maybe 30 years from now, it'll get up to this point." Well, it was 1996. It destroyed the land, and because of excessive water. But it's hard to face. Um, that's a lot of grief to let go of your family home.
Yeah. Well, it's just funny to me because the ocean is so beautiful and it's what all of us love. Like my mom has tattoos of waves on her arm that she incorporated into a tattoo that represents our family. And it's also at the same time that's something that's kind of risks something that we've held in our family for, decades and decades. So it's so beautiful, but it's terrifying. And I've felt that way about the ocean since I was like 4 years old.
Yeah, yeah, we
Yeah.
need to respect that power, don't we?
Yeah.
And that is what was forgotten when people came to this country. There was manipulation and dominance, separation from the land. Yeah, that your mom feels that on her arms. I love that, the tattoos.
Mhm.
Oh, well, and it's interesting you talk about putting money into your family home. Would you like to speak more about the overall community, the tribe, the impact? Because not everybody, I understand, has money to keep putting into their home, and there's an effort to move the tribe. I've seen the streets that have been built, but there aren't houses. And um, do you want to say anything more about that before we move on to the work that you're doing in your job, your career?
Yeah, so the relocation effort has been something that the tribe has been working on for well over a decade now, as far as planning goes. Uh, the funny thing is like people for tend to forget that it has to come in like steps. So the tribe has been fortunate enough that they had to find funding for the planning phase. That's was completed. Of course, then there's all the back infrastructure that has to be put in, water, sewage, electricity, etc. So that is kind of the most recent phase of this new Upper Village relocation project that they're working on. So, like you mentioned, the streets are also built, and now we're getting into a portion of having to, or the tribe is getting the actual funding to build houses on the ground, and it's a great opportunity. I think that it makes a lot of people hopeful for the future because there's a lot of younger generations that worry about moving their family up the hill. But also it's not secure enough moving forward that we exactly know when all those houses will be built. Um, I can't believe how much money is required to move a village from one place to another. And um, I just am very thankful and I applaud the effort that's been put on by everybody throughout the process, from state and federal folks, the tribe itself, all the staff that's put in their time to make sure that they're doing this. Because I would say a lot of the staff that have helped us are actually non-Quinaults, and I'm very thankful for the, what they've given to us in this process. They come into the community, they care, they see what's happening to our community from sea level rise, and they want to help. And I'm thankful for them. Um, I think it'll be an interesting process as people start to move into that area. Not every person that lives in the lower village now is necessarily somebody that wants to leave their home that they've grown up in or that they have memories with their loved ones in. So I don't think everybody will be in a rush to move up to the new location, but it is a necessary step, and people will kind of trickle up the hill, I guess, over time, which is funny to say. Water going away from the ocean rather, or people away from the
Right.
ocean. Um, but yeah, I'm nervous for those that won't want to move, and I think it'll mm, mm, result in maybe a little bit of family squabbles, just trying to get people into a safe area.
Yeah. Yeah. Safety. I understand not wanting to leave though. Yeah. Um, yeah, we could swing into more specifics around your career. You were at the School of, would you like to say at University of Washington, the School of Marine and Environment?
Environmental Affairs, School of Marine,
And
and yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
And that's,
This,
go on.
oh, I'm sorry. The School of Marine Environmental Affairs is housed at the University of Washington, and it was such a great program for me. I it's something that I've wanted to do for years and years, and then unfortunately, like for a while during undergraduate school, I didn't think I was going to go back. I thought I was completely burnt out, and but then again, I guess fortunately, I decided to go back to grad school um, because I knew that I needed more education to kind of go further in my career. I had reached a point as being a legislative aide for Quinault Nation's vice president at the time. And I saw that in that role, if I wanted to move up into upper management ever at the tribe, that I needed a little bit more education behind the experiences that I held. Um, But the School of Marine Environmental Affairs was great to me. I loved all the faculty I met there, and my faculty advisor, his name was Phil Levin, who helped us with our work with the Nature Conservancy and the Floodplains by Design project. Phil was great. Now he's been stolen by the Biden administration to work on the first national nature assessment, and super exciting to see what he's doing. But I was thankful that Phil brought forward this project with the Nature Conservancy that worked with Floodplains by Design, because they came forward originally with wanting to work on a paper they wrote about how flooding impacts Latin X communities. They were going off basically the wording out of the US Census as far as their data went. So um, we kind of started with looking at the disproportionate impacts of flooding to Latin communities, but then we were able to kind of adapt it, because I was like, there was a lot of work that they had put into the paper that they published originally, and we got caught up on like the other uh, category that the US Census uses that, encompasses like Native Americans too. Um, so working with my capstone partner, Olivia Zimmerman, we kind of sat down and we were like, how can we look at flooding in this floodplains by design program and the indigenous communities in Washington state? Because that data, they have it. We were like, what is getting in the way? And it's from there that we move forward to look at the program, and we decided to do some informational interviews with natural resources program managers for tribes throughout Washington state. And we were able to find during our interviews and, working with the data after that, many tribes were facing a bunch of inequities with the program and barriers to the program that were, hindering their ability to participate with floodplains by design. And fortunate enough from that, I would say I was nervous that our research was going to sit on a shelf. And luckily enough, the Department of Ecology, after they took over the program from the Nature Conservancy, they took our data, and Olivia now works there. But they were able to kind of change the needs or the requirements for the grant. And I'm fortunate and happy to share that it's because of our work that no tribes have to have a match requirement to be able to participate in this grant process. And that, if any project on the ground has a letter of support from tribes, they also don't have to have a match requirement. And I was floored to hear that. And I was so excited when somebody said it's because of the work that 100% of the projects that were funded through this last cycle did not need to have a match requirement. So just meant more money on the ground to all of these projects to help alleviate flooding issues and fish barrier issues. So it was,
Fish
I
barrier
felt,
issues,
yeah, I celebrated
flooding.
after. It was exciting. Like reducing
Congratulations.
flooding.
That is so fantastic. That is so fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Wow. Impact, true impact. And
I'm very proud of it.
you should be. And can you paint for the listener an example of a floodplain issue and a tribal and help to a particular tribe, or anything you'd like to say to help someone really understand the problem and how that's being addressed?
Yeah, so I'd say a great example of what a lot of the tribes in the Floodplains by Design program are dealing with, like a culvert underneath the road that is too small. So some of this grant funding will allow the project designer or whoever to go in and make that culvert bigger or turn it into a bridge, just to allow for more water flow. Another example is like reconnecting a old oxbow or river channel just so that the water has more room to like flood into areas where it traditionally used to be able to go, but now may be hindered by barriers related to roads, some levees and stuff. Breaching levees was a great example. The levee, this is not related to floodplains by design program, but One of the prime examples I think of reconnecting a whole river delta and flood channel is when they removed the levees out of the Nisqually area where the Willie Frank park, I don't remember what it's called, but reconnecting that floodplain there in that river delta, it just completely turned it back to more of a natural state and how it was traditionally. And it's a great thing that I don't know if anybody else does this, but when they drive through it in I-5, looking over Nisqually and stuff, you can just see how connected that channel is. And you never know what part of the day you'll be driving by, whether the tide will be completely in there or out there. But either way, it's a great wildlife reserve area, and it's a just a great example of what can happen if you just kind of return the river back to let it do what it wants to do and flow where it needs to flow.
Yeah, and that's a tribal led and government funded project.
I don't know if necessarily the Nisqually one is. I just think of it as a great example for what can be done when you remove barriers.
Mm.
But with the Floodplains by Design program, that's definitely a state funded program that tribal folks and other neighboring communities or state counties can apply to and stuff too. But having the tribal support there definitely increases their grant opportunity to be able to receive the grant.
Wonderful. For the typical average Fox News listener, or perhaps for the kind-hearted person who cares but maybe doesn't pay attention as much to issues, why is this important? Why help people understand what's happening right now that is different perhaps than when we were kids?
Yeah,
Or the
so
same, and now there's more. Right? I shouldn't say that. You were aware as a tribal member of this land. You've been aware. Your people have been aware. Go ahead and speak freely to any of that, please.
yeah, I would say the world is changing and definitely, in some spaces we try to avoid using the term climate change because it's not widely accepted. My dad himself is definitely a climate change denier, and I love him dearly, but we just avoid that topic together. But the world is changing out here on the coast specifically. We're seeing flooding and sea level rises and breaches in our um, storm walls that we haven't seen before. We're seeing atmospheric flows and these storms that dump more rain on us in one night than we've seen historically. And it's all these kind of like interconnected moments that, if you have increased water that's dumped onto a river like that, that can scour the reds away and wash away, fish that would have created a whole generation of fish again in 3 years. Like it's a 3-year cycle. When seeing the blob out in the Pacific Ocean when it was around, that giant warm blob, literally named the blob by Noah, was there. We're still seeing impacts of that from 2015 to the fish run that should have been there in 2018 to 2021. And now we're getting into 2024 and we're seeing the bounces there, but it's not just the 1 year occurrence. And it's because of, it's like we're kind of fighting from both sides. We're doing the work on the ground to open up rivers and give them back spawning habitat and stuff, allow them to get into these areas where they can lay all their eggs and their reds and be there. But at the same time, there's issues with tire dust, 6 ppd running off into our water streams that are killing like coho salmon. And it's we're doing the work to give them more habitat, but we're having to combat things like the temperature waters of these streams and other chemical issues and invasive species. And so for folks that don't really care, it's like, or may necessarily not focus on it, it's just like, it's not just one species issue. It's when you look at salmon, called a keystone species for a reason. They provide to us, they provide to wildlife, of course, the orca whales, and it's a great umbrella species to stand behind because the habitat we protect for them is also habitat we protect for future generations and for tribal and non-tribal folks alike. I would
Yeah.
like I would love for all generations of future Washingtonians to be able to, still go out and fish for salmon, be able to eat it here, and not have to rely on getting salmon flown in and stuff. So that's important work.
Yes, it is. I love how you said that if we focused on that one species alone, that would impact so much. I've heard that multiple times. And wild salmon, not farm raised salmon, but that's a whole nother issue. We won't get into that. I'm going to throw a few questions at you that I've been generally giving to each person, and you've addressed a lot of it already. Feel free to speak from your heart or from your work. I guess that's probably both for you as it is for me. And just this first one you touched on already with your mom. I would love to see her tattooed. How does water shape us?
Mm, I believe that water shapes everything that we do. Of course, we're comprised of mostly water, and you know, it might feel a little goofy for me to say, but every other person I love, all my animals, have rely on water to live. And um, here, I feel like I would always say that we're all interconnected, and one of the biggest things that carries us forward there is every living thing that surrounds us needs water. And with as far as Quinaults being, we were always interconnected to our other tribes by traveling by water. We were ocean going people, had our ocean canoes to stand being on the Pacific Ocean itself and going into the Sound. But there's so much history involved with water, and I think that one of our biggest threats to losing the livelihoods and traditions that we have as Quinault people are just being, it's the threat of losing that fresh water that we have. We have plenty of salt water that'll be around till the day that my great great grandchildren, is here and maybe even gone themselves. But it's the fresh water and the threat of losing that I think is what scares me for the future. There's We have a lot of fresh water here in Washington, or I shouldn't say have a lot. The Olympic Peninsula keeps getting droughts every summer, which I'm like, we're uh, amidst the rainforest, and it's kind of disheartening to hear about wildland fires that happen in the rainforest, or to hear that we continue to be in a drought year after year. And like I said, all of our water, I think the problem is that it all decides to come at one time, and it's coming in these massive storms in the winter. However, we have a bunch of rain instead of snowpack that leads to water issues in the summer when the water we had here left so quickly. It wasn't snow, so it's not around during the times that we need it the most and when our salmon need it the most. And I hope that is a issue that we see go away relatively quickly, but I'm trying to be optimistic without being too maybe what is the reality of not optimistic at this point.
Thank you. How have climate change, actually, I feel like you've already said all this, but let's just see if it touches any other area in you. How have climate change and local water issues become more urgent for humans, Northwest tribes, and endangered species like salmon and orca?
Yeah. Well, I think one of my favorite ways to view it that I've learned from the Changing Currents water summits program is they call it From Summit to Sea. They talk about water issues from, the tips of our mountain in the summits all the way out to the ocean. And I think that's a great way to kind of view the issues that are there, because it's not all in one spot. It's all over the length of the river and multiple rivers we have in the area. Starting with the summit, and of course, we're not seeing the snowpack that we previously seen in years, and that alone it starts an issue with the top that goes all the way down to the bottom, and then even going out to the sea, then there's sea level rise because then there's too much water there. So I would love for folks to kind of explore that program itself. They hold it every year, and it's just a great way to like kind of frame the issues that we're seeing from climate change, and just um, it's interesting to always keep in mind that it's not a one-stop shop problem. It's through and through throughout the whole whole water cycle. I feel like a second grader when I talk about the water cycle. I can just visualize. Uh, yeah.
Thank you. Um, yeah, this um, sort of like what you would want to say to other people that have their hearts open and want to move in ways that are overcoming the past and moving toward a just future. And I'll ask it in this way: like, how can Washingtonians relate to nature, steward the ecology around us, and work together toward a just, sustainable future for all humans and the more than human, the water, the fish?
I think this is kind of my larger. I would say that it's great for all of Washingtonians to keep in mind just how interconnected their lives are with water and nature in general. It's great to be reflective in spots where you can be incredibly busy that you tend to forget about the nature and even the water that comes, the background for water that comes out of their own tap, and um, the salmon that they might eat in a fancy restaurant. So take some time to see if there's ways that they can engage and help protect the things that they might use themselves. There's opportunities where, like, the federal government is seeking comments, and your ability to go in and make a comment on a federal project that would impact salmon, it might take up a few minutes of your time, maybe 10 minutes max, but you could provide support to the tribes that are there. Often in those comments trying to protect this habitat for salmon, or there's other NGOs that they can stand behind, the environmental community, to just take a little bit of time, and these multiple voices are what creates an impact and pushes the work forward. I mean, money also is another way. If folks want to donate to projects that are available, then are doing the work to kind of work in this water and climate change spaces, or many tribal organizations have their own nonprofits, 501c3s that folks, a little bit of money goes a long way when all of us are scrambling for funds in an area where we have limited capacity. And then last but not least, I really want people to share the stories that they hear from like tribal communities. There's many tribes that are facing impacts from climate change that match what I shared here about Quinault and sea level rise. So it's actually sharing those stories over and over again to folks that may have not have heard the story before, that, it just, every additional person that gets to care is a person closer we are to seeing progress and change in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the Quinault tribe is not the only tribe working on relocation because of sea level rise. Many
Yeah.
stories. Yeah, shared experience. I know you've worked with government, you're working with governments. Is there anything more you'd like to say to people that we can do around voting, policy? I think you said some of it, influence, funding. I heard someone say, what do you think about Washington State and federal influence? I mean, we're, I don't know what to say. Let's not get into the future 4 years unless you want to, but what are your hopes and concerns? What would you like to see more from us average voters and on that more direct action, if there's any
I
to
would
say?
say I would encourage voters, if they want to, especially, let me take a back step here. Um, I would say that a lot of the tribal communities, and I would say a majority, if not all of them, all directly work with legislators and such in our community, all of our federal tribal liaisons, our lobbyists and stuff to work on projects that move, we put the environment first. And I always think it's a great opportunity to look at who the tribes endorse for folks in their federal and state and even the local uh, races, because we prioritize those that are wanting to protect and prioritize what we're focused on. Like if there's a county commissioner that isn't necessarily want to protect like a port and stuff, like that's a great example of at least what we do here at Quinault, and that's how we endorse folks that endorse the work that we want to see happen, and primarily the areas that we want protected. So I don't know how to say that more eloquently other than just to see who the tribes like and who they endorse, and that's probably a good spot to start. It's a good way to be
Amen.
a
All
tribe.
right.
Yeah, it's a good way
Um,
to be a tribal ally.
a term I like, yes. So last thing, it's a little bit in a different direction, but it's related. I read a book called Being Salmon, Being Human by a Norwegian philosopher. And he actually did a lot of study around our region and the issue of wild salmon, because in Norway, they're having the same conflict of, the loss of wild salmon and government thinking it's okay that we just have farmed fish. And
Mm.
but there was a story he shared from the Quinault tribe, and I want to know if it's familiar to you. I've for years have been wanting to find out the truth in this, and maybe if you don't quite know, you might have someone you could direct me to, because it has to do with language. He
Mm.
told the story, this Norwegian philosopher, that he learned from someone in the Quinault tribe about the word Hoquay. And I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing it right. And
A- is it Hoquat?
yes,
Oh,
yes,
quat.
Hoquat. And he described it as that when the first white settlers arrived, that it's sort of translated as the people half there or the people asleep. And I almost fell out of my chair when I was reading this, because it resonated with me from being a child growing up and feeling this sense of like something's really wrong, but the people around me, some of my elders, it's like they're not there, they're not paying attention. And but I don't know if it's true. And then something in there about the town Hoquiam that we
Mhm.
have in Washington, that comes from that word. However, my friend who I sail with, who grew up there, he's like, no, it means like burning logs or something. So, Tanya, can you help me out here? Is there any truth in any of this language? It's
Yeah,
an
actually, Hoquat
apropos
mean,
story. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, I'm giggling to myself. And I know my husband will get a good giggle out of this too, because my husband's just a nice white Minnesotan boy, and I love him from being the Midwest. But he would giggle too, because I would say that I haven't met a lot of people that knows what the word Hoquat means, but that's our Quinault word for like a white person. So there's some truth, Hoquiam, Hoquat, and yeah, that I think I want to give that book a nice view too. And I believe there's got to be a lot of truth into that story. So I'd like to read it myself. And um, gosh, I have a person that comes to mind who could definitely verify that for us. He's our cultural historic preservation officer for the Quinault tribe, and I can imagine him getting a little giggle out of it too, being able to talk about that. So
Yeah. And is there, thank you. I'd love, after we get off this interview, I'd love to have his contact if you would be so kind to share it with me. And
yeah,
does it translate into the people half there or the people half asleep, or do
I
you?
think there's some truth between like people half asleep. Like we do use that um, name as more like to describe folks that were necessarily tribal in the community, but also just I don't know how to say this in a way, but like traditionally when you talk about stories is like the people who are there to take more than necessarily just what they need. So that there's definitely some truth in that. And gosh, I wish I could elaborate further, but I think that the person I'd like to introduce you to could do so much better of a job. It's
Yeah, perfect.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I look forward to that. Well, it's great. I mean, flipping back to climate denying and what we're facing in the next 4 years. I mean, I'm sure you've heard there's sort of this making fun of wokeness or whatever,
Hmm.
right? You understand? And but really, truly, we have been asleep, many of us that look like me. So we need to wake up. We're waking up. I think we're waking up. Do you have any final words that you would like to say
Yeah, I guess I
before we
just
end this?
yeah, I would just kind of want to note on it being interesting. Um, the Quinault tribe is out here in Grace Harbor County, which tends to be like what folks think of more as like a red area. And it's kind of interesting just because when you think of the political divide in areas, it's like, you can kind of get into other political components, but it's interesting that in an area that's also rural, we have a lot of folks that want to be able to continue to fish and stuff. So it's like finding your allies for these like environmental water, all these projects in places you wouldn't necessarily, I guess a lot of like liberal folks wouldn't think that we would go to look to, but um, the fishing community is comprised of both liberals and more of like Republican conservative folks. And so it's like, I just want folks to keep that in mind as they move forward with like water issues and stuff. It's always great to put it through the lens of like these problems in our communities that are affecting our water that do and are driven with like by climate change. There's a way to frame things, to like talk about wildlife and salmon and, being able to utilize our natural resources that if you frame it in a different way, you might get a lot more support than if you use some words that they might not necessarily like.
Yeah, thank you. That's beautiful. I really appreciate you saying that because, I always talk about moving with love, that we move with love, not as just a sentiment, but an energy that is about regeneration and it's about reconnecting and connecting. And I have a dear family member who lives on a political side that I'm not quite on, but yet I also see deep respect and I see this kind of division between the right and the left that is
Mm.
causing so many problems on both sides. And how do we rebuild something together? And um, I don't know. I hope something in this sharing that we're doing together will make that happen.
Me too.
Yeah. Thank you, Tanya, so much for your voice, for your work, for your heart, um, for your message, for what you're doing out in the world. And congratulations again on the impact of your work. And I know that you will have many blessings on the work that you're doing. And I look forward to following you and keeping up with the impact that you're having.
Yeah, thanks for chatting with me, and I'll definitely still be keeping on in this space for probably my entire life. So
Yes, you will. Thank you so much.